Alright folks, how you doing? So this is my response to Skeptic's video about me, and I'd have to say he did make some good points, here and there. Um, Generally, for the most part, I would say not, but sometimes he did actually hit upon a good point. I think he composed himself quite well. I think he conveyed himself quite well. I was expecting a big rant, full of expletives and all this, but he kept his cool and he made his point calmly and rationally. So I give him points for that. Overall, Guy Skeptic has been very rude towards me and very uncivilized, I would say, which is mostly like baffling to me. Like, when you make videos in a public forum like YouTube, sometimes people are going to come along and disagree with you. You don't have to be a jerk about it, on the other hand. But there you go. I mean, there is a way to conduct yourself, the way I see it. People are always going to disagree with you, especially if you're putting videos out there for everyone to see. Do you think everyone is going to 100% agree with you all of the time? That's very naive. And the fact that he's, using my video without permission was quite rude, in my opinion. He could have asked. It would have taken him 10 seconds, to ask, plan on making a video about you, do I have your consent? And I would have said, yeah. It takes 10 seconds to ask. I mean, that I thought was a little uncalled for. But even then, to my mind, using my video on his channel is ultimately self-defeating, because you can see when you watch his video that I backed up 100% everything I was saying. Like, about, about me having like Anglo-Norman and Anglo-Saxon ancestry if you study the surnames on houseofnames.com. And he's coming out and saying like that House of Names is like a fraud and all this, with no evidence, no proof. It's just, la la la, they disagree with me, so they must be wrong. Which to me is like a sign of a lack of maturity. He's totally narrow-minded, driven by his own narrative, and it seems to be emotionally rooted, not logically rooted. Because I think facts and data and rational thinking and logic all fall down on my side. I mean, my videos about the genetic composition of the Scots and all this, it's all totally proven and backed up. I mean, I supported every single point that I made. To my mind, he, on the other hand, has proven nothing that he's saying. It's just his opinion, and you agree with him or you don't. So you can fall down on his side even though he's proven nothing, or you can argue against him. But why would you agree with him when he can't support his own arguments? I mean, you can say what you like about me. Like I've said, I supported what I was saying. I backed it up. I went onto House of Names and screenshotted it and proved the origin of names like Young and Patterson and Fraser and Lovett, and the origins of the Dalriada, how the origin of the term Scots, where that comes from. I totally backed up and proved every single thing that I said. No one can say that I didn't, because I did. And he's just coming along and saying, well, I just happen to know better. Well, I don't like to brag, and I don't really like to talk about myself, but I graduated from the University of Stirling back in 2009. I studied history for 4 years. I've got my certificate up there on the shelf. Bachelor of Arts with honours in history and religious studies. And a lot of it was Scottish history. So I have an academic background in Scottish history. And to my mind, he's just totally missing the point of how feudalism works. The Normans that were brought in by King David I were brought in because the Normans were, on the ascendant at the time. It was a totally logical decision that made complete sense. You want the baddest dudes on the block to be on your side. You don't want to be fighting them. You want them to come down on your side. And to me, it was a very smart decision. The Davidian Revolution and all that, and the reforms by King David, I mean, he just saw which way the wind was blowing. The Normans had conquered England. Unless he really played his cards right, they were probably going to come and take over Scotland as well. I mean, just look at the military track record of the Normans. Not the types that you want to be messing with. They're the guys you want on side. Their record speaks for itself in that regard. So when King David is inviting the Normans into Scotland and giving them land and making them swear fealty to the Scottish crown, I mean, that makes total perfect sense. And it did pay off down the line, because the Normans fought for the Scots. in the First Scottish War of Independence. Or some of them did, at least. You know, Robert Boyd, who's very probably Norman. Sir John the Graham for sure. I made my video about him, my tribute to John the Graham. You know, but his perspective just seems to be so linear and so one-tracked and so, you know, one-dimensional. It's just like, I'm right and everyone else is wrong, and I don't care what evidence or what you have to say. I mean, you know, I think overall that it's going to be seen that I support my points, you know, because, like I said, I come from a back and let me try that again. I come from an academic background. I was trying to say back and academic at the same time. Sometimes I do that. I try and say two different words at once and it comes out cross-wired. But, you know, I totally backed up everything I was saying because I come from that background in terms of, you know, like studying at university. I mean, I've wrote dissertations and essays, many of them. I always had to support every single point that I made. You know, that's part of my training from coming from the academic, you know, being a student, you know, you have to support every point you make, and you can't use Wikipedia, otherwise you'd be disqualified. You actually have to support it with real sources. So I come from that backdrop, like I've said. I think I'm kind of disappointed that Get Skeptic has been pretty rude to me and quite inconsiderate, and it's just unfortunate that we can't sit down and work out our issues and put our heads together and, you know, work everything out. But you know, he's got his side, and if you disagree with him, then you're a piece of crap, apparently, you know, which I think is rather immature, I have to say. But it is what it is. I mean, he has his channel, I have mine. I don't really plan on making any more videos about him because it's obvious that he's never going to listen. You know, he's got his narrative, his point of view, and how his mind, he's totally right, even though he can't support what he's saying. I can, he can't. You know, he's just coming out and saying the House of Names is a fraud. Well, prove it. Did he offer any evidence? Did he offer any proof? No, he just came out and said, oh, it's just garbage because it disagrees with me. You know, that's basically it, you know. And the whole thing about how the Scots are Irish, well, some of them are, yeah, for sure. Some parts of Scotland, the Scots are descended from the Dalriada, who were Irish. And like I said, I never denied it. But the fact of the matter is, Scotland is composed of 4 different kingdoms. It's composed of the Northumbrians, the Strathclyde Britons, the Picts, and the Dalriada, you know. And it's composed of 6 different ethnicities, in my opinion. But, you know, sometimes you just can't really get through to people. Sometimes they just don't want to listen. I can't do anything about it, you know. I'm disappointed that Get Skeptic has always been very, very rude towards me. I don't think it was justified. I don't think it was warranted. You know, I made a video like, you know, it is pronounced Ged, but that was meant tongue-in-cheek. That was meant as humour. You know, it wasn't meant as offensive. If he took offence to that, I apologise. I don't think he's ever going to apologise to me, but there is such a thing as dignity, you know, and integrity and things like that. I mean, I don't see that ever happening. I don't think he's ever going to ever apologise to me. You know, I think his behaviour, if I'd behaved the way that he's behaved, I would be embarrassed. But it is what it is. Anyway, thanks for watching.